Hello everyone, hi! So today I want to read you some beautiful quotes from books that I've been reading lately. And by lately I mean the past months or so. And I want to do that because I felt a little out of touch with my love for literature lately. I've gotten myself into this situation where I somehow always feel rushed when I'm reading. And that's probably partly because I study literature, I'm in the middle of my semester, and I'm honestly just trying to stay on top of the reading assignments week to week. And I'm also just emerging from the haze of creating my course on French literature. I did a lot of reading for that. And even though I love studying and I loved making the course, in both instances, reading was somehow connected to performance. And then I just start feeling like I'm running in this unsatisfying hamster wheel or something, where paradoxically I feel like I'm reading too much. And at the same time, I'm not reading in a way that feels really good enough. I've neglected to stop and smell the roses, so to say. And it's fine, it happens from time to time. So I'm determined to change that today. This is it. I've concluded that I just need a little bit of a breather. I need to take out the speed and the pressure and just go back over some of these beautiful passages that I have highlighted and just reconnect with my love for literature. So that's what I did yesterday evening on the couch as preparation for this video. And immediately I felt a lot better. It soothed my heart, and I'm gonna share my findings with you in this video. So this is gonna be a very chill, kind of undynamic video. Great to fall asleep to, I bet. I have some poetry with me, some essays, some drama, and a few novels. It's also gonna be somewhat of a wrap-up and my opinion on a lot of these works. In case you're new here, before we get into the video, I'm Maria, and I study comparative literature at the University of Vienna. And on this channel I document my journey of what it's like to study literature. So if you're interested in that, you should subscribe and stick around. And if you want more from me besides just my YouTube videos, I have just released a course on French literature. I'll link it in the description box below. And if you want to support the channel financially, I'll also link my Ko-fi account. Let's get into the first book now. Proofs and Theories, Essays on Poetry by Louise Glück. Louise Glück famously won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and those are some essays about writing. And if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I'm aiming to read an essay every month. And there are about 16 essays in here, and they're all about 5 to 10 pages long, so really perfect for like a little nugget of wisdom in between. And this is really one of those books for me that I just keep reaching for over and over again. I've had it for kind of a long time, I think 4 years or something. And I just periodically, every few months, go back to the bookshelf and keep reading it. So I'm never really done reading it, and I'm never really actively reading it, but her takes on poetry and what it means to be a writer just, I don't know, have such an impact. I'm gonna read you the beginning of the first essay in the collection, Education of the Poet, where she talks about really the struggle of being a writer and that it looks a lot more glamorous from the outside than when you're actually doing it. And I think this applies equally to all creative endeavors. And even just the first sentence is so powerful. It says, quote, "The fundamental experience of the writer is helplessness. This does not mean to distinguish writing from being alive. It means to correct the fantasy that creative work is an ongoing record of the triumph of violation. That the writer is someone who has the good luck to be able to do what he or she wishes to do, to confidently and regularly imprint his being on a sheet of paper. But writing is not decanting of personality. And most writers spend much of their time in various kinds of torment, wanting to write, being unable to write, wanting to write differently, being unable to write differently. In a whole lifetime, years are spent waiting to be claimed by an idea. The only real exercise of will is negative. We have toward what we write the power of veto. It is a life dignified, I think, by yearning, not made serene by sensations of achievement." The next book I have here with me is A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. This is the first book I read in 2025. I started reading it on the train back home from Paris. And I have to say, I don't think Hemingway is my kind of author. His style just doesn't resonate with me 100%. If you don't know, this book is about young Hemingway and his days of living in Paris and the friendship he had with other writers, what it felt like to be in a city like Paris at that time. He talks about his relationship and what it was like trying to make it as a writer. And it is, of course, the quintessential book to read if you have lived in Paris, or if you love Paris, or if you want to take Paris with you, because the famous sentence, if you're lucky enough to have lived in Paris as a young man, then wherever you go for the rest of your life, it stays with you. For Paris is a movable feast, is what will calm your heart if you miss Paris, and it definitely was like that for me. I'm glad I read it, and there's this one scene that I cannot get out of my head. It's not even that special, but it just sticks with me, and it is when he talks about James Joyce. I'll read it to you. It's on page 49 in my edition. We were hungry again from walking, and Michaud's was an exciting and expensive restaurant for us. It was where Joyce ate with his family then, he and his wife against the wall. Joyce peering at the menu through his thick glasses, holding the menu up in one hand. Nora by him, a hearty but delicate eater. Giorgio, thin, foppish, sleek-headed, from the back. Lucia, with heavy curly hair, a girl not quite yet grown. All of them talking Italian. And somehow that picture of Joyce being there with his friends and just speaking Italian is, I don't know, burned into my mind. I just love that Joyce spoke so many languages. And I think what that scene is it really depicts kind of a life goal for me to be able to easily just switch languages, and when I see friends from a different country, to just go to a restaurant with them and have a conversation with them in Italian, you know? I'd love to learn Italian. And the fact that these people could just so effortlessly do that, it's kind of inspiring to me. Here's another quote I highlighted from the book. I knew I must write a novel, but it seemed an impossible thing to do when I had been trying with great difficulty to write paragraphs that would be the distillation of what made a novel. Moving on, I think it was actually Hemingway's A Movable Feast that inspired me to finally read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because of course Fitzgerald was also part of the crowd in Paris that Hemingway is writing about. And everyone apparently realized really early what a great writer he was and would still become. And I agree. I mean, his writing is delicious, and his prose comes with so much rhythm and clarity. It's just very interesting. And I got this great, like, kind of older Penguin fiction edition secondhand, which I really love. And I'm about halfway. I have to say, I've never seen the movie, and I don't really want to know anything about the book. Like, I just want to read it myself. And again, I feel like F. Scott Fitzgerald is not gonna become my favorite writer. Like, I can appreciate him in the abstract, and I see what people mean when they say he's an amazing writer. But, you know, that doesn't mean that it clicks 100% with what I prefer to feel when I'm reading. Oh, I think I didn't say what the book is about. Here it says, Scott Fitzgerald's masterpiece and a milestone in 20th century literature, The Great Gatsby is a dazzling social satire with millionaire Jay Gatsby as its intriguing anti-hero. I'll read you a quote from page 49. He smiled understandingly. Much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faded, or seemed to fade, the whole eternal world for an instant, and then concentrated on you, with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you hoped to convey. Precisely at that point it vanished, and I was looking at an elegant young roughneck, a year or two over 30, whose elaborate formality of speech just missed being absurd. Some time before he introduced himself, I'd got a strong impression that he was picking his words with care. What a description of a smile of approval that someone gives you. Okay, next we have a little bit of leftover from the French course. This is Marcel Proust's Days of Reading, or Sur la lecture in the original French. Oh my gosh, this makes me so nostalgic. The relationship I currently have with Paris is that I'm trying not to think about it too much, because I don't want to make my life and my relationships and everything more complicated by wanting to move to Paris, even though they have a fantastic master's program where they combine philosophy and literature at the Sorbonne. Anyways, this is a small book of essays by Proust on reading, and it is a great way to get into Proust's writing style, because obviously it's easier to read a small essay like that than to read In Search of Lost Time. And if I ever make a video, which I want to, about how to get into Proust, I'll definitely talk about this book. But Days of Reading, it's so beautiful. It's basically his reading philosophy and why he reads and what he remembers reading did to him as a child. This is so delightful. Right now we've arrived at something that I truly, truly, truly love. Here's a quote from page 75. For as long as reading is for us the instigator whose magic keys have opened the door to those dwelling places deep within us, that we would not have known how to enter, its role in our lives is salutary. It becomes dangerous, on the other hand, when, instead of awakening us to the personal life of the mind, reading tends to take its place, when the truth no longer appears to us as an ideal which we can realize only by the intimate progress of our own thought and the efforts of our own heart, but as something material, deposited between the leaves of books, like a honey fully prepared by others, and which we need only take the trouble to reach down from the shelves of libraries and then sample passively in a perfect repose of mind and body. Now, another book I never really stop reading are the Sonnets by Shakespeare. I've taken this down again lately because it's May now, and my niece was born last May, and I still remember vividly that my brother called me and he told me about her. And it was really out of the blue, like she was born earlier than we all thought. And I was just on my way outside to study some Norwegian, I think, and he called me and I was just so, I don't know, in awe and happy. And I don't know, I felt carried by the beauty of life for the rest of the day. And the first thing I thought about after I hung up the phone with my brother and went outside is that it was such a beautiful day that she was born on, because it was the middle of May and, you know, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. And I had to think about that sonnet by Shakespeare, a very famous sonnet. I'm gonna read it to you in a moment. But ever since then, that sonnet just reminds me of her, and she's such a little sunshine, you know, it really suits her so perfectly. And I mean, Shakespeare's sonnets, together with the poetry of Emily Dickinson, is just some of the finest poetry I've ever come across. Like, you cannot beat how beautifully he writes. Let me read you that sonnet about May. Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines of time thou growest. So long as man can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Here's another one I love. It deals with the question of how good can win when what is good is sometimes so fragile and small, and the bad things in the world are seemingly so powerful. I think Shakespeare comes to the conclusion that, at least in writing, it can. So here it goes. Since brass nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad mortality oars waste their power, how with this rage shall beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than a flower? Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wrackful siege of battering days, when rocks impregnable are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong, but time decays? O fearful meditation, where alack shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? Or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? Or who his spoil of beauty can forbid? O none, unless this miracle have might, that in my black ink my love may still shine bright. Shifting gear quite a little bit here, I have Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I had to read this last semester for my course L'Esprit des Machines, the Spirit of Machines, and I was kind of mad because I struggled with this book. I think science fiction is just generally not for me. Dick's writing felt equally confusing and then also very depressing, right? Like a dystopian view of what it would be like when androids and machines take over the world. And I had to struggle through it, and I did. And here in the front, I printed this summary of the book. It's like 10 pages or something, because I thought, well, if I need it for the course and for my exams, then I really have to know what it's about. And then the professor just scratched it last minute. She was like, oh, we don't have enough time to look into that book as well. And I was like, okay. I think my conclusion is that I haven't really come across a science fiction book that I've really liked. I'm not sure, I've read George Orwell. I don't think that's science fiction though, technically. And I've read some Margaret Atwood, which I didn't like. I don't know, if you have recommendations on where to start, I'd be happy to give the science fiction genre another try. But anyways, this is about a dystopian scenario where very few people still live on Earth, I think. And then there's also these androids that pretend to be humans, and they develop all kinds of like empathy tests to test whether that person standing in front of them is a human or an android. And it's really bizarre and scarily accurate and probably very relevant with everything that's going on with AI at the moment. But the quote I want to read to you is pretty much from the beginning, where they talk about the fact that they have a mood organ where they can just choose what type of mood they want to be in at the moment. It's like, I don't know, to me that's really a kind of a caricature of, people being obsessed with their state of mind and wanting to switch it at any moment or something. Here it goes, this is on page 3. At that moment, Iran said, when I had the TV sound off, I was in a 382 mood. I had just dialed it. So although I heard the emptiness intellectually, I didn't feel it. My first reaction consisted of being grateful that we could afford a Penfield mood organ. But then I realized how unhealthy it was, sensing the absence of life, not just in this building but everywhere, and not reacting. Do you see? I guess you don't. But that used to be considered a sign of mental illness. They called it absence of appropriate effect. So I left the TV sound off and I sat down at the mood organ and I experimented. and I finally found a setting for despair. Her dark, pert face showed satisfaction, as if she had achieved something of worth. So I put it on my schedule for twice a month. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to feel hopeless about everything. About staying here on Earth after everybody who's smart has emigrated, don't you think? But a mood like that, Rick said, you're apt to stay in it, not dial your way out. Despair like that, about total reality, is self-perpetuating. I program an automatic resetting for 3 hours later, his wife said sleekly. A 481. Awareness of the manifold possibilities open to me in the future. New hope that... I know 481, he interrupted. He had dialed out the combination many times. He relied on it greatly. Listen, he said, seating himself on his bed and taking hold of her hands to draw her down beside him. Even with an automatic cutoff, it's dangerous to undergo a depression. Any kind. Forget what you've scheduled and I'll forget what I've scheduled. We'll dial a 104 together and both experience it, and then you stay in it while I reset mine for my usual businesslike attitude. That way I'll want to hop up to the roof and check out the sheep and then head for the office. Meanwhile, I'll know you're not sitting here brooding with no TV. He realized her slim, long fingers passed through the spacious apartment to the living room, while smelled faintly of last night's cigarettes. There he bent to turn on the TV. From the bedroom, Iran's voice came. I can't stand TV before breakfast. Dial 888, Rick said, as the set warmed. The desire to watch TV, no matter what's on it. I don't feel like dialing anything at all now, Iran said. Then dial 3, he said. I can't dial a setting that stimulates my cerebral cortex into wanting to dial. If I don't want to dial, I don't want to dial. And most of all, because then I will want to dial, and wanting to dial is right now the most alien drive I can imagine. I just want to sit here, on the bed, and stare at the floor. Her voice had become sharp with overtones of bleakness as her soul congealed, and she ceased to move, as the instinctive, omnipresent film of great weight, of an almost absolute inertia, settled over her. I mean, can you imagine having a relationship where that is the first conversation you have in the morning? Moving on to some more poetry, this is Averno by Louise Glück, a poetry collection that I've kind of had for a long time, and I still don't know what I really think about it. So this is the second Louise Glück book that we have in this list here today. But her poetry is of course a lot more modern than, say, Shakespeare, and a little bit, not immediately intuitively easy for me to get into, but there are some really beautiful poems in here. This is a bilingual version, by the way. I kind of ignore the German side, but that's what they had at my local bookshop. This is part 2 of the poem Landscape. This poem really speaks to me at the moment, considering how unstable and unpredictable so many things in the world are. Time passed, turning everything to ice. Under the ice, the future stirred. If you fell into it, you died. It was a time of waiting, of suspended action. I lived in the present, which was that part of the future you could see. The past floated above my head, like the sun and moon, visible, but never reachable. It was a time governed by contradictions, as in, I felt nothing and I was afraid. Next, I won't spend too much time on this book, but I do have to mention it because I am reading it. Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. Is it my new favorite book? Maybe, possibly, very likely. I've had so much fun going over my highlighted sections again because I'm writing a quite beefy essay for one of my seminars. about this book, and I couldn't be more thrilled. I'm gonna focus on the theme of the library and how only some people are allowed into it and how they kind of determine the narrative that everyone else lives by, and I'm gonna draw a lot of parallels to what that means in our time when education isn't available to everyone and how controlling information is a major factor in fascism. I obviously want to share all of that with you once I'm done writing my essay, but it will still be a few months until I have carried together all of my sources and have actually structured my writing in a way where I can present it. But man, there's something in this book. I'm even feeling it now. It's like I open it and I just get so excited. Like, I don't even know why. I don't like detective stories usually. I don't usually like stories from the Middle Ages or anything. It's just a story about a bunch of monks. All the signs lead me to believe that this is not a book I would like, and yet still I love it. Page 35. For architecture, among all the arts, is the one that most boldly tries to reproduce in its rhythm the order of the universe, which the ancients called cosmos. That is to say, ornate, since it is like a great animal, on whom there shine the perfection of the proportion of all its members. And praised be our Creator, who has decreed all things in their number, weight, and measure. And page 149. Oh my gosh. See, this is why I'm doing this. I feel invigorated. This is so great. Okay, so this scene explores how often scholars or people who have to write all day, how their body kind of aches from their work, you know, even though you're just kind of sitting and reading or sitting and writing. And it's very relatable. I'll read it to you. Poor Venantius' desk had its back to the great fireplace, and it was probably one of the most desired. At that time I had passed very little of my life in a scriptorium, but I spent a great deal of it subsequently, and I know what torment it is for the scribe, the rubricator, the scholar, to spend the long winter hours at his desk, his fingers numb across the stylus, when even in normal temperature, after 6 hours of writing, the fingers are seized by the terrible monk's cramp, and the thumb aches as if it had been trodden on. And this explains why we often find in the margins of a manuscript phrases left by the scribe as testimony of his suffering and his impatience, such as, "Thank God it will soon be dark," or, "Oh, if I had a good glass of wine," or also, "Today it is cold, the light is dim, this vellum is hairy, something is wrong." As an ancient proverb says, 3 fingers hold the pen, but the whole body works and aches. Yeah, will I talk about this book? The Flight Without End. As I said, I have to read it for my History of German Literature university course. Oh my gosh. And apparently I don't like it that much. I struggle with it quite a bit. I'll read you a quick quote in German and then we'll move back to the last 2 books and it will be in English again. Ein Mensch ohne Einkommen ist wie ein Mann ohne Namen oder wie die Schatten ohne Körper. Man kommt sich vor wie ein Gespenst. Das ist kein Widerspruch zu dem, was ich oben geschrieben habe. Ich habe keine Gewissensbisse wegen meiner Untätigkeit, sondern weil meine Untätigkeit kein Geld einbringt, während die Untätigkeit aller anderen gut bezahlt ist. Geld allein verleiht Existenzberechtigung. Now the last 2 books are also leftovers from my French course, leftovers in my mind from my French course. This is an abridged version of The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, the Bible of feminism, right? And I've always felt so uncomfortable talking about feminism, and what I found fantastic is that in the introduction, in the first sentence, Simone de Beauvoir acknowledges that she feels the same way. I've just felt very seen when reading this. So here goes the first sentence of the introduction. I hesitated a long time before writing a book on women. The subject is irritating. especially for women, and it is not new. Enough ink has flowed over the quarrel about feminism. It is now almost over. Let's not talk about it anymore. Yet it is still being talked about. And the volumes of idiocies churned out over this past century do not seem to have clarified the problem. It gave me that wonderful feeling we readers often feel, right? When you read a sentence and you feel very understood and something inside of you just goes like, ah. And lastly, another book I've read for the course, Honoré de Balzac's Père Goriot, Father Goriot, and I have picked a very particular quote for this video that is about Paris. I think it is known, Khaleesi, that Balzac gave us this sprawling picture of Parisian life in the 19th century, and that so much of what we know about French society and history comes from his books. It's incredible. Way too much to get into right now, but here's a beautiful quote from Father Goriot, pretty much in the beginning, page 10 in my edition. But Paris is a veritable ocean. Take as many soundings as you like, you will never know how deep it is. Travel round it, describe it, but no matter how systematic your travels or your description, how numerous and eager the explorers of the sea, there will always be some place untouched, some cave unknown, flowers, pearls, monsters, something unheard of, forgotten by the literary divers. The Maison Bancaire is one of those curious monstrosities. Feels like Paris is still pulling on my heartstrings a little bit. But anyways, I would love it if you left me in the comments one beautiful quote that you have been reading lately. I love collecting quotes. I love hearing what you're reading and what touches you. So that would make me so happy. Leave me a comment if you like. And otherwise, I'll just see you again in my next video. Bye bye.